Hi, this is Ann with Finance on the Offense, and today I'm going to talk about a few ways to teach your kids about money. Now, full disclaimer, I actually don't have kids, but my parents did a pretty good job, in my opinion, of teaching me about money from a very young age. So I'll go over a few of the things they did, and then I'll also tell you about some other good ideas I've heard over the years that I would definitely use myself if I had kids of my own. All right, let's get started. First up, an allowance. When I was a kid, my mom and dad gave me a small allowance to use to buy things that they didn't really want to buy for me. Or I could save it up and buy something bigger later on. I earned this allowance by doing stuff around the house, like doing dishes or helping my dad do stuff on the farm. Just small things like that. And doing those things wasn't optional, but they did give me an allowance for helping out. Anyway, this really taught me delayed gratification because if I wanted anything cool, I had to save up my money over time to buy it. They also got me a bank account about when I was 6 years old or so. It was a custodial account, of course. And they did that so I could see how interest works. Now, when I became a teenager, they kind of changed it up. They gave me a lot more money, but they only gave it to me once a month. So that meant I had to budget. I couldn't spend it all at once or I wouldn't have anything left if something came along that I really wanted to do at the end of the month. As I got older, my parents would give me optional things that I could do to earn money. So for example, mowing the yard. I think I got something like $25 for doing that. And then of course there are other things I could do around the house to make more money too. This taught me the value of hard work. If I'm willing to put in more work or time, then I'm going to get more money. Later in life, this translated to working a side hustle in addition to my full-time job to get ahead financially. My parents also taught me about the stock market, 401ks, Roth IRAs, CDs, which were really a good investment at that time, and savings accounts. I really learned during this time what it means to get interest on your money, which is basically passive income. I found out that I could buy a CD and leave my money in it for about a year and make 5 or 6% by doing nothing. Of course, those days are over for CDs, at least for the time being. But let's look at how sweet CDs or certificates of deposit were back in the day. So I'm on Bankrate.com, and the historical CD interest rates, the chart for them looked like this. So this is 1984 through to 2021. Back in the 80s, if you put your money in a 1-year CD, you're looking at getting over 10% interest on your money. And now you're looking at less than 1%. So yeah, don't put your money in a CD. Another thing my parents did was they sort of taught me to maintain my same spending level even if I received a raise. And the reason I say sort of is because I don't really think this was intentional, but it was just sort of a lesson by example. This is something that they did. My parents were super frugal when I was growing up, and they pretty much still are. So when everyone else had big color TVs and matching living room furniture and Nintendo, my parents had a 13-inch black and white TV, and every single piece of furniture in the living room was different because it was all hand-me-down. They wouldn't even get us an Atari, which at that time was super out of date anyway. The thing is, they just prioritized security and an emergency fund and investments over the latest and greatest gadgets. So this taught me to see that we could have a pretty awesome life without having all that stuff. And so I guess the lesson I learned is that I don't need a lot of material things to be happy. And also, less trendy and expensive stuff leaves a lot more money to save or invest or whatever. So even if I get a raise and I have extra money coming in, I'd much rather throw that towards early retirement than spend it on stuff that, will get old and out of date in a couple years anyway. Another thing they taught me along those same lines is they taught me not to care about what other people are spending their money on. And they also taught me not to care what other richer people thought of the stuff that I had or didn't have. And this probably wasn't really intentional either. They've always done this by example. So when we would see other kids at school with some new gadget, we would ask our parents for that. They would really drive home the fact that we did not need that just because everyone else had it. Anyway, somehow that stuck, and I'm so thankful for that. I really don't dwell too much on what other people have or what I don't have that I wish I had or anything like that. They did a good job of helping me to not join in the rat race. One thing my parents didn't do was just hand me money. other than the allowance and before I got my first job. If I needed money, they would loan it to me with an expectation and timeline of when it would be paid back. Now, they didn't charge interest, but they also never just gifted me money for no reason. I actually think this is something that a lot of parents do with the best of intentions, but in my opinion, it can really hurt kids. There are lots of benefits of paying your own way. Self-sufficiency, understanding finances more quickly, and most kids will work harder with more determination if they don't have like someone to lean on and know they can get money from anytime. They learn self-respect, confidence, and independence. So those are the ways that my parents taught me about money from a young age. And here are some other ideas that I think would be really great to try. First, I would keep them in the loop on all the big purchases and goals the family has and what they're doing to achieve them, like saving for a house or car. Maybe talk about giving up a few things in order to reach those goals, or taking on some extra work in addition to a full-time job. Another thing I would teach them, Dave Ramsey kind of advocates for giving an allowance, but splitting it up 3 ways: spending, saving, and giving. I think that's a really good idea because everybody knows about the spending and saving, but I think giving is such an important part of life, giving back to your community and being generous. And then something I saw on Reddit I thought was really interesting. One person was talking about teaching their kids that not just labor is important, but also ideas and soft skills. So they change the allowance that their kids get every month. If one of them finds a great idea for the family, or maybe figures out a way to save the family some money, they get kind of a bonus. And by doing that, they're showing that ideas and concepts and efficiencies can also be really lucrative. For example, most company CEOs don't have the hard skills that the people underneath them have, but they have a lot of soft skills, and that's how they got in that position. And of course, CEO pays very well. So those are just a few ways that if I were raising kids that I would use to teach them about money. All right, if you like this video, please click on the like button, and I'll see you next week with another Finance on the Offense video. Thank you.